Good evening, Mr. President, student trustee, board members. It's my pleasure tonight to give an update on our facilities. I've entitled this one, An Overview of LUSD's Ongoing Quest to Provide High-Quality School Facilities. All right, so this is the picture of Mountain House and the master plan as it relates to K-8 schools, the high school, and it's getting close to full build-out with the initial vision. What's going to be very important for this presentation is this map, because I would imagine a lot of people in the community are not aware that Mountain House is not the district boundaries. It's actually much larger and much more complicated. So it's a little bit faded, but on the left is an extremely rural area in Alameda County. The very small school of Mountain House is there with less than 20 students. But any high school students that fall in that region go to our high school. And then the second one is in yellow, and in it incorporates the 580 freeway, the Grant Line Road, 205, all the way up to Byron Highway. So if you go to where it says Lammersville Unified School District and look to the right, it ends at Kimball High School, essentially. So the industrial park over by Kimball High School, way out into rural California. So when I refer to what's going on in the district, we need to know what's going on in Mountain House, but we also need to know about potential projects and housing that would create K-8 students and high school students outside of Mountain House master plan. So there's 6 parts to this presentation. I'm going to give the big picture. I'm going to talk about the history and facts about Mountain House High School. I'm going to give some numbers and some data. I'm going to talk about a new deal, a modernized mitigation agreement. I'm going to talk about the status of where we're at today, and I'm going to proffer up some conclusions that include some hypotheticals. So how do you predict student population growth? How do you know what to do and where to put your resources? So for us, the number one question is, what is the total student population going to be when all the houses are built and everything is settled within our district boundary? And what impacts will that growth have on the number of K-8 schools, the Mountain House High School, and what considerations do we need to make along the way? It's a big, broad thing to think about, but here's really what we have to keep in mind, in particular the board, the deciders, the oversight. Is the Mountain House student generation bubble going to keep inflating? Is it going to deflate? Or is it going to plateau and settle? And there's some data that I'm going to present to you that show a little bit of all three. But when you're talking about new K-8 schools, how are we going to house all the high school students, those 3 questions are going to keep coming up over and over again in the history that we face in this district. All right, so here's some key terms just to review so that I'm going to probably mention all of those multiple times. The Mountain House Master Plan is the approved detailed vision for the community. Specific plans 1, 2, and 3 are identify a student generation rate. A community facilities district, or CFD, is our access to bond funds and rules about the use of bond funds. The 1998 mitigation agreement provides the rules for building and funding schools and negotiations. The Mello-Roos bonds are a funding source for K-8 schools based on a mitigation agreement. The state matching funds are a funding source for K-12 schools based on a process. Developer fees are a loan from developers in a funding shortfall situation related to school construction. General obligation bond is when the voters approve a tax on their home value to be put towards big projects, in particular in our case, schools. And finally, the certificate of compliance, which is the only leverage point that exists in any agreement that we currently live with to leverage developers so that they are performers in the name of the community and our schools and our students. Again, we give a number of presentations over the last 15, 16 years. This is just a list of the years where presentations such as this have gone out. And this will not be the last one. We will continue to communicate our quest. All right, so the funding chase, I gave a comprehensive explanation of the funding chase and its impacts on K-8 schools and the high school in January of 2025 The QR code there and the link, if anybody will put, when we post this, if anybody really wants to watch that, it's about 45 minutes long. You're welcome to. It's posted there. These are all the different machinations the districts have utilized in our effort to gain funding to get our schools built on time. But for this conversation, I'm going to talk about the last one for a second. Coming to the next board meeting, there's a school fee justification report. I'm going to call it the developer fee report. And it is our chance to raise the developer fees on commercial property. But in it has a student generation rate. And it's based on the census numbers divided by the number of housing units. And so it gives another look at what student generation is. And in this presentation, I just juxtapose those numbers to create a picture for us to consider. All right, so we like to talk about Rutherford B. Hayes in 1876, but really the story I'm going to cover tonight is the 22 years from '04 to now and all that we've accomplished as a school district. It looks like we missed Pombo there at the bottom of that one, but the writing's too big. But those are all the schools we built, including a comprehensive high school, and everything with an asterisk is there's currently housing being built on varying levels. So it's quite an accomplishment of this community, the board, and the effort to get those buildings built and the kids having beautiful 21st century schools. So the funding source for K-8 schools is Mello-Roos bonds and state matching funds. The funding source for high school is not listed in the mitigation agreement. It's not really there. So what really happened is, in a very quick overview, there are multiple phases to get Mountain House High School where it is today. Approximately 50% of the high school was built in phase one. Of that 50%, 40% of it came from Tracy mitigation fees based on LUSD students who attended Tracy, and another 60% came from developer fees. And so we built the first phase of the high school, 50% of it based on that. So let's talk about Mountain House High School. So the story of Mountain House High School begins in 1994, not 1944, 1994. So I'm going to give a brief history about some key points and facts about that journey. So these are the maps that we found in the archives of the original master plan, and this is from 1994. If you look at the map to the left and you see in yellow highlighted, it says adopted. And if you look into the Mountain House configuration, you'll see two red circles. If you look to the map on the right, you'll see the word proposed and you'll see one red circle. It was these maps and the approval requests from the developer at the time that reduced the number of high schools in the master plan from 2, the map on the left, to 1, the map on the right. This is another map that was part of that presentation, and you can see the current site of where Mountain House High School resides. So this slide is titled Short-Term Gain, Long-Term Pain, the Original Sin. So the original sin is, for whatever reasons in 1994, 2 became 1 high school. 2 high schools became 1, has created lots of consternation and concern about the total size and population of Mountain House High School, and how are we going to address future growth and the limited amount of property. So let's talk a little bit about who is responsible. So Trimark was the original master developer. They presented a change to the master plan. The County Board of Supervisors approved it in approximately May, June 1994. The second school site, which resided in Cuesta, has become houses, and with houses comes profit for developers. The Mountain House High School site, the second site, it remained 45.5 acres, and it was not adjusted to address the needs of a campus of 2,400 students. And most importantly for this presentation, the student generation rate was set then, and it was put into all 3 specific plans, which again identify the rules about construction and negotiation. A student generation rate at the high school for a regular home of 179, and for multiple family homes or high density of 0.043. So if you take the what we believe is the most accurate housing unit total that will be built in Mountain House, and multiply it by 0.179, you get a high school of approximately 2,725 students. So here's what I think new people to the community don't completely understand. There was no promise of a high school. There was no funding source for a high school. The 6 boxes presented to you there are the story of how Mountain House High School came to be. And for people that, I know everybody gets frustrated with certain things here and there. If there was no high school in Mountain House High School, if those 6 boxes weren't successfully achieved, then the high school students, 2,550 of them, will all be going to high school in Tracy. And they would either be bused or they'd be driven by their parents. So the fact that these 6 things happened, I think some new people in the community, I wish they would take a look at the history of this. There's a QR code there. There's an article from 2010 about step 1, which was the unification of the district. So what happened was K-8 students went to Lammersville, high school students went to Tracy. We had to negotiate with Tracy for them to give up those kids. We came to an agreement, and that agreement is covered in a Tracy Press article in that QR code. That's really important because no high school happens if that agreement isn't successful. The second fight was in step 2, which was to get developer fees. So I talked about 40% of 50% of the high school was built, 40% was from mitigation fees and state funds, and 60% came from the developer fees. There was a colossal fight fought by the board at that time, by the former superintendent, Dale Hansen, and it was victorious. And what happened was the development group, the master developer at that time, Shea Mountain House, only wanted to give $26 million for phase 1 of the Mountain House High School construction. That construction cost $93 million at that time. They wanted what is happening at Delta Mountain House campus to be a large part of the Mountain House campus to save $26 million in developer fees that they get back with interest over time. The district won that. And so as a result, the $52 million in developer fees, Tracy mitigation fees, and state funds were pooled together to get to step 3, which was construction of the first part of Mountain House High School. So $93 million went to the admin classroom wing, the multipurpose room, the gyms, the stadium, and the fields. If you were around in that time, you know that the other sites of the other buildings was dirt and bark. And so we opened, Mr. Faubert sitting there proudly, still wiping the bark out of his eyes on windy days. A lot of bark and an amazingly beautiful first half of a high school. So step 4 happened. The school board's vision was we must complete the school. So in 2016, a general obligation bond went forward. It was victorious at 62%. The second half of the high school was built. And with that, we have the theater, the Learning Commons Library, the Aquatic Center, the tennis courts, and the CTE wing. So the reason why what we have now exists is because the first 4 things were done with prudence and hard work and effort on the part of a lot of people who work in the district. Step 5, we believe in the 7-period day, even though we only have to give a 6-period day. And 70% of the students at Mountain House High School, 2,550 kids, take a 7-period day. So in order to support that, we brought in 8 portables. And then to continue to expand program and create more classroom access, we built brick and mortar 15 additional classrooms. And finally, just in the last couple of weeks, step 6, we finally acquired, after a 4.5-year long negotiation, the 19 acres of fields 2 blocks south of Mountain House campus for fields, and we currently are putting in the fields. Anybody who drives by there will see that they're going to work, and potential additional facilities if needed. So again, just to circle back, Mountain House High School happened because of those 6 steps and the people who made them happen, period. And couple that with the original sin of 2 high schools become 1 requires that we look at some data. So let's take a look at some data. Remember, we're talking about, is it going to keep inflating? Is it going to deflate? Is it going to plateau and settle? That's the question we have to keep asking and we have to answer correctly over time. All right, so here's an update on the Mountain House Master Plan. Legally, they can only build 16,105 housing units. If you take out the 870 age-restricted units for 55 and older, you get 15,235. If you look at the city's numbers, they have what they call current expected housing units at 15,771. So if you take the two 15,000 numbers, you could look at that's a pretty good guesstimation about where we think things are going to go in terms of total housing units. In terms of total houses built, the City of Mountain House gave us these numbers, that there's 8,440 houses built. If you take away a vacancy rate, it's actually 8,060 units, and that's what we can say with the most accuracy are the current housing units in Mountain House that are providing students. And then there are also 380 housing units that are new that have been built that are currently not occupied and are for sale. And so just whetting your appetite for data, if you take the student generation rate from the specific plans of 0.676, that's approximately 254 K-8 students who will attend Costa or Pombo, and somewhere in the range of 64 to 127 students, and I will explain that in greater detail later, for the high school. So let's talk about student generation rate. So in this specific plans 1, 2, and 3, that's where Chapter 5 is about schools, Table 5.1 is about student generation and what type of houses. So here's what I can tell you, that over time for the K-8 schools, the generation rate was very accurate and it was consistent until a new trend started, and we started seeing it in Hanson, and Cordis is clearly the best example of it, and we believe that Costa will show the same, is that 6.676 per house has been very accurate. We are concerned that the medium, high, and high density houses that they're building, that 0.338 per household for K-8 student generation is demonstrating some flaws, at least when you look at the student populations, overall student populations at Hanson and Cordis. That doesn't mean it's proven, that just means it's a concern that we're monitoring. But what I can say is that specific plans 1, 2, and 3, the 1.79 per house or the 0.043 per medium, high, or high density is wrong. It's wrong because we've already surpassed the 2,400 students with 3.5 schools to build. So what we can say over the time that these 3 plans, the specific plans 1, 2, and 3 have been in existence, that we have longitudinal data to say that those generation rates are too small. So let's take a look at the history here. Mountain House High School has grown precipitously over its 11, 12-year history. We opened with 475 9th and 10th graders. From 15, 16 on, we've had 9th through 12th graders. We're anticipating approximately 2,650 students to start next school year. And really, it just depends on the housing market because there are lots and lots of projects that have been approved. So that's the big picture. Let's take a look at 8th grade numbers feeding the high school. This is a crucial number when you're looking at student generation. So if you like bar graphs, look at the tall ones in the middle. If you like numbers, you can look at the numbers. But if you look at Wickland, Bethany, Cuesta, Altamont, Hanson, and Cordis, you can see that very consistently over the last 5 years, similar numbers of 8th graders have been going and matriculating to Mountain House High School. Every time we add a new school, if that new school produces similar numbers of 8th graders at the high bar level, then we can say that there's evidence that the balloon is inflating and no evidence of deflation, because those are very large numbers going into the high school and explain why the high school has grown so rapidly. If you look at the total number of students who are in LUSD who live in particular neighborhoods, this is another breakdown. So at Altamont, in total Altamont students at K-8 is 617, Bethany 747, Cordis at 1,030, Costa at 563, remembering it's only half full, Hanson at 948, Lambersville at 140, Pombo has 75, Cuesta 776, and Wickland 658. This is an example of the 3 questions: inflation, Costa, Hanson. Plateauing and settling, Altamont, Bethany, and Wickland. and no signs of deflation. But these are the numbers that we have to look at. But there's three different looks at the considerations for student generation. So what are the impacts? So what the impact of the high school is gathered, and what is it shows up in the K-8 school, and then it goes to the high school. So we know that in 94 we got the 0.179 and the 0.043. This report will be going to the board. It's the school facilities fee justification report. If you look at a 10-year longitudinal statistical look from 2016 to 2026, you see a growth, a projection of upward. And this year, the developer fee study says that the student generation rate in Mountain House for high school students is 0.334. Now remember, the specific plans say 0.179. So right there we have a discrepancy, and that raises a concern. If you take all of those numbers from 2016 to 2026, you get a mean of 0.26. But when you consider high densities at a lower rate, I think it's fair to look at student generation from a 0.22 to a 0.26 per household. And accuracy on this, on getting this number right, is absolutely crucial to the conversations that we're going to have in negotiations moving forward. So let's take a look. So if you apply the student generation rate in the master plan to the specific plans, to the three numbers that I gave earlier about the full build out number at 16,105, the adjusted number by dropping the 870 age restricted down to 15,235, and the city's approval of 15,771, you can see that with pretty good accuracy, we're going to end up with somewhere between 10,200, 300 to 10,800 K-8 students. That's consistent. That's a different look. And so what does that mean? Our K-8 school capacity. So I just gave you the number, about 10,298 to 10,880, based on a range, a student generation range of 0.22 to 0.26. With 11 schools, if you apply 925 students per school, you get about 10,175. If you take the capacity at Lammersville, which is 300 plus, at full build out, you'd get 10,475. Now, let me say this as loudly as possible. All of these numbers are approximations. I am not presenting a statistical analysis. I'm using numbers and bringing forward approximations to paint a picture so we could have discussions moving forward about student generation. All right, so then let's look at the high school. So this is where things can get interesting. So if you look at the bar graphs to the left, that's the student generation rate in the specific plans. And if you look at the far right, that is the 2026 developer fee studies number of 0.334. That is a massive difference. Now, it is unbelievably highly unlikely that the far right column is going to happen. I put that in there for effect. But what we do need to talk about is the 0.22 on the middle left and the 0.26 on the middle right. It is my perspective, based on including high density, the student generation for high density, that the 0.22 is probably the best place to start a conversation at full build out about what that might look like for high school students. So again, we took that 0.22 and we put it against the 16,105, the 15,235, and the 15,771. And so that projected to somewhere in the 3,300 to 3,550 number for total high school students. If that jumps up to 0.26 over time, you can see a big shift. And I'm going to address what we need to do if we get 0.22 versus 0.26 or higher later in the presentation. So Mountain House High School's capacity right now, implementing specific plans 1, 2, and 3, is 2,400 students. We added 8 portables. We added 15 new classrooms. We added 19 acres. The capacity today is 28 to 2,900. We could get more in there, but I think that's a fair number, 28 to 2,900. And I'm going to reference the 28 to 2,900 in other parts of this presentation as well. So let's talk about what are we going to do now? Now we have some numbers that have a big discrepancy. We have an analysis that says further conversations need to be had, and we have a 1998 mitigation agreement. So here is my recommendation. We need a modernized mitigation agreement and a new agreement with the developer and with accurate numbers. So why do we need a new agreement? 0.179 when compared to the developer fee study is nearly 2 to 1. So who's right? Or is it the range at 0.22 to 0.26? So we need to get into a real conversation about the next 25, 30 years about what that looks like, because that's going to lean heavily, our decisions are going to lean heavily on what that outcome is. All right. So again, it goes back to, are we going to maintain this trajectory or is it going to reduce? And it is also very important to note that Mountain House Master Plan is not the whole district. The whole district includes the industrial park all the way to Kimball High School, all the way past 580. And there are aspirations in between Mountain House and Tracy. So it's our perspective that we need to have this conversation now to avoid some of the problems we've run into with the decision in 94 and the agreement in 98. The school district has already submitted 2 formal letters and one to the Tracy Planning Commission, and also one to the Mountain House Planning Commission. Both groups have followed up with subsequent phone calls with me. So I have laid out basically the case that I'm making here in writing and through verbal communications. All right, so what does a new agreement need to look like? So one is we have to consider the evolution of Mountain House over time and what have we learned since 1994. 2, we have to consider all the potential projects, anything that's approved, anything that's planned, anything that's hypothesized as part of a conversation about what does a new agreement need to incorporate to protect the district's interest from any of those things happening. And it all has to be put within the district boundaries, not Mountain House. All of those things fall into the next, which is what are the circumstances that would cause the need for a second high school within LUSD boundaries that would be part of Lambersville Unified? And finally, what language in a new mitigation or a modernized mitigation agreement would be needed that would impact K-8 schools and the potential for a second high school? So our priorities are pretty simple. We feel like we've created, all the people in this room, all the past boards, all the staff, all the community, all the parents. We feel like we have one of the best high schools in California, and it needs to be preserved. We have a 7-period day, which is an exceptional opportunity where all kids get to take the opportunity to take an additional period. 70% takes us up on it. That needs to be protected. My recommendation today is we should cap or limit the number of brick and mortar buildings that we're building to 2850, because if we keep solving problems and keep building buildings on that campus, and all of a sudden 2850 in brick and mortar can cover 3200 in brick and mortar, there will never be a second high school. So we need to keep that in mind, is how many actual brick and mortars do we need before this all gets resolved? And finally, if that's the case, portables that we own can be repurposed for other needs in the district. There's no logical argument that says that Mountain House High School site can absorb one of these supermax numbers, the ones that at the 0.334 rate. There's just no way. And the 19 acres, we need funds for development. We've spent all the funds we can on the 6-acre field project, which has started now, but it could provide some relief to high school students, especially if there's a scenario where we reach a certain number and we're waiting for a new school to come online. So these are all things that are priorities for us for consideration. All right, so this is really important. So the lessons from 1994 can be learned. And so before things get down the road too far, we have the opportunity to really enter an agreement with the wisdom of our experience from these 32 years. So trigger points can be part of an agreement where if the student generation creates this point, one thing happens. If it creates this point, another point, this happens. And if it creates another point, this happens. And it all comes down to the accuracy of student generation and the 0.179 versus 0.2226 to 0.334. I think this is important. As part of the agreement, we need to identify a site that may or may not house a high school as part of the agreement, with the considerations of all the things that I've presented so far. And at a supermax number, because remember, if we get X amount of space and all of a sudden lots of new development happens, nobody anticipated, and you need Y space, you need to start with Y space. And so what I'm proffering here is we need to identify a space at the supermax number. The CDE gives guidance on that, and it'd be about a site of about 70 to 75 acres, depending on a couple of factors. We need to identify who is responsible for funding a second high school, and the burden shouldn't fall on the shoulders of the school district exclusively. If you go back to the 6 steps that it took to get Mountain House High School, we're proud to say we were part of that. But that doesn't need to be a path that repeats itself, because I think multiple scenarios can be discussed and we can come up with a better solution. So here are 3 possible scenarios. 1, cap the permanent building at the facilities and prepare for a new high school. This means the balloon or the bubble keeps inflating, and we are going to exceed what was said in specific plans 1, 2, and 3 in the master plan. And we need to have contingency plans in such a deal to address student generation in the short term, midterm, and long term. Scenario 2, which I believe will be the position that the developers will take, which is student population is going to contract over time. Neighborhoods age, kids move out, parents stay in the home, and you're never going to generate this high number always. But if that is the case, then we need to also consider other things, which is if we're going to have 2,800 to 2,900 high school students, or it gets larger, do we need to acquire more land from the developer just in case we need to build new school facilities, new classroom buildings? And the third scenario is the max number gets approached, that everything happens that goes, and it goes big out. The 205 things all get approved by the Tracy Planning Commission and City Council, that new development in Mountain House, industrial commercials flip to housing, and land in between Mountain House and Tracy get approved. Then we're talking about that 0.334 will happen, and we need to have 2 high schools, and they're going to have to be built for a large number of students. So in a negotiation, these are the type of scenarios that could be considered and part of the conversation. So here is what I believe the district position should be. I had spoken a couple of slides earlier. The burden of funding the high school fell on the shoulders of the school district. Developers did provide developer fees, and they are being paid back with an interest rate. They did not do so celebratorily wise. That was a terrible use of the English language. And they were not very enthusiastic about that, but they did come forward after a fight. Part of the mitigation agreement has multiple ways that schools can be funded. One of those is a developer-built school. The difference between the model I'm presenting here versus the model that we've been living with is the developer fronts the lion's share of the construction money, and in a phased construction model, that they can dole out the money in chunks. They can recoup their funds the same way they're recouping the funds from the developer fees from Mountain House High School. They get it from fees collected over time from homeowners. But I do want to point out that anything that's left over once they've been paid back needs to come back to our district, because we would need that money for modernization or new projects on that high school campus, and state matching funds. So the combination of those 3 things is a perfectly viable funding source and manner in which a second high school, if ever needed, could be funded. And I need to put in there, because that's how we completed Mountain House High School, there is potential for the need for a second community general obligation fund that could support building ancillary facilities. But that is a perfectly viable manner in which a second high school could be funded. So let's take a look at where we're at right now. So I just want to remind everybody, this is the story that got us to Mountain House High School. We would like to do a new modernized mitigation agreement to avoid this type of journey. But the result of it is pictures like this. And so there's more work to do. So let me give you kind of where we're at right now. So we've built a 21st century award-winning high school, and the programs go with it. Space solutions have already been solved at the high school to keep expanding programs because we always plan proactively, and the board supports the vision for that proactive management. We have 9 award-winning K-8 schools, and out of the 9 K-8 schools that we have, there are 3.5 more schools that need to be filled with students. Costa's half full. Pombo opens with less than 200 students, and then it will fill. Neighborhood I will fill, neighborhood K will fill. And that should be the story of Mountain House, but it may not be the total story of Lambertsville Unified based on our district boundaries. So here are 2 pictures. The picture on the left is a circle is the 19 acres. If you look to the top, there's the varsity softball and baseball fields, and that to the middle and right is the rendering of the 15 classroom project that we opened in 2025. So I just showed you pictures of that, and I've spoken about the fields, so we've been successful there. Here are some other options if we need to find more space at Mountain House High School. The Early College Pathway Program, which is state and national award winning, could be morphed into a middle college program and housed at Delta Mountain House campus at some point in time. The model would be tweaked. It would be a dependent district charter where the kids are our responsibilities, but that would be a way to pull 150 to 250 students off campus. If we would want to do that, if we were to need to do that, that is one option. Another potential change is to move the EPIC program and the online pathway program and the space that they take up to provide more classroom space. I think it would be two to 3 classrooms if that were to happen. And this is one we would never want to do because we're very proud of it, but you could create more classroom space if we reduce the 7-period day from 9 through 12 to drop grade levels. That would be a last resort. I hope that never happens. All right, so let's talk about K-8 schools. So here's the Mountain House vision, north of Byron Highway and College Park. There's lots of projects going on. This was presented to me by Mountain House Developers, the developer in charge of north of Byron Highway. And these are the numbers. So housing units in J, which is now Pombo, 956, K, 1163, 1312 in I, and then kind of a hybrid where 870 age-restricted housing, which I've mentioned multiple times in this presentation, and 610 market rate housing, which produce students. So the school sequence is pretty simple. We've got 900 kids students means classrooms for 900 kids. We can put more kids in there if we need to. Pombo is first, I is second, K is third. And these will roll out hopefully on the timeline 29 and by the 2030s. The long-term concern about the 870 age-restricted units is simple. There's no doubt in my mind that a developer is going to come forward at some point and say there's no market for age-restricted and we need to flip those to market rate housing. If they want to do that, the answer has to be absolutely not. All of the money that's been spent that could be generated Mello-Roos-wise is gone to the 3 schools that exist. You need to stay with the agreement, and any oversight bodies such as the city or the county need to say no. If not, there's going to be a space problem both at the 3 K-8 schools, and more importantly, if there's no, this would be a stressor that we would need to consider a second high school on. And the only tool that the district has is a certificate of compliance, which is the leverage that says that developers do not get permits until they've met their compliance standards. College Park, there are 3 projects. To the far left, there's A8. To the super bottom middle right is a kind of black area. That's another project. And then to the right of that, at the bottom right of the far right, is B9 and B10. Those 3 projects are queuing up. Everything else has been sold to a builder and is in some form, shape, being processed for housing and infrastructure. So College Park is building out probably in the next 5 to 7 years. And again, we know that the school that we built at Costa was going to be stressed for space. We only had $60 million, so that's what we built the school with. We negotiated 2 additional acres, and on that, we have space to add additional classrooms. The funding for those additional classrooms will come from Mello-Roos bonds sold on those projects I just outlined, and additional state matching funds. So we just have, if the timing, what we want to do, how we want to do it, and the time it takes to do it. But I'm just straightforward. We are definitely going to have to build additional classroom space, not a ton, but additional classroom space on Costa. And so this is the conclusionary part 6. All right, so here's the reality in 2026. So in 1998, they said there was going to be 9,400 total students, 7,000 K-8, 2,400 high school. Over the 22 to 24 period, I started talking about a larger number. I started talking about Dublin Unified, 11 to 12,000, 8,750 K-8 students, 3,000 high school students. Based on the information in the comparative study between the specific plan 1, 2, and 3 generation rate and the developer fee study using 0.22 as the student generation rate, I think we could kind of look at a little bit of a different number with all the newer projects, is about 10,200 K-8 students and about 3,350 Mountain House High School students. Again, if everybody has the right amount of kids in the total amount of class at the max number. So the K-8 funding chase will continue. These are all the things we've done to build schools. We will continue to do those things. Any funding left over by any of those machinations will not be available to the developer, because we will always need that funding for our school facilities within Lambertsville Unified. So in summary, 179 is too low, and we have 30 years of history to prove it. 0.22 seems like the best number in a range of 0.22 to 0.26. I think that's more accurate. We need a new and modernized mitigation agreement. It needs to have trigger points, and those trigger points have to determine if or when there would be a need for a second high school, and that has to take into consideration LUSD's district boundaries. But I do want to point out, in less than 12 years, Mountain House High School is an award-winning 21st century educational juggernaut. It is really top notch. We need to protect it, and we need to keep the community's interests in mind. So my final point, LUSD's long-term student generation rate is up to an inflation, deflation, or plateau and settle. If it becomes and stays at 0.179, there is no need for a second high school. If it's from 0.18 to 0.22, we may need more land to put on classroom facilities, but it would be difficult to make an argument for a second high school in much of that scenario. If it's 0.23 to 0.26, that, in my opinion, would create a trigger point for the need for a second high school, and that high school at 0.26 would be 1,200 students. If it hits between 0.27 to 0.32, it'll be a larger facility of over 2,000 students, the second high school, and if it hits 0.34 and over time, we're talking about 2 very large high schools. So the best path to ensuring the district's interests and learning the lessons from 1994 and the original SIN and all the things that we've done to get to where we're at today, a new and modernized mitigation agreement needs to consider what the high school would look like, a second high school in the future. And with that, are there any questions?